Welcome to Spiritual Psychology. My name's Renee Lavallee Mckenna, and I bring my 30-plus years as a recovering addict and ex-crazy person turned therapist and shamanic healer to bring you snackable teachings on spirituality, psychology, and all things personal growth. And today I want to talk about past life regression. And past life regression is a technique or a therapy where we use hypnosis or other body-centered mindfulness methods to uncover and explore the memories of past lives. And past life regression can be really helpful in understanding the origins and repetitions of unconscious patterns, which some might understand as an aspect of karma, and how that understanding or information can have positive impacts for constructive, productive change in this lifetime. It can also light a fire under your butt when you realize you may be doing the same thing over and over again, perhaps for millennia, and you might want to deal with that stuff now before you drag it into the next lifetime. Past life work can also be very helpful in relieving anxiety about death. In the way I work with past lives, it can really give people a very grounded experience with higher consciousness, with ancestors, helping spirits, guides and teachers, and the healing that's possible in a human life, and also expanding, maturing, and developing their own personal understanding or paradigm of what happens after we die. I don't do a ton of past life work, but it is one of the tools I have in my toolbox. And there are many circumstances where it's very helpful. And past life experiences will often arise spontaneously. And when they come up, we got to pay attention because the psyche has our highest good in mind. Now, I don't tend to do a lot of past life work because most people have enough stuff going on in this lifetime. We got plenty to work with. But I was working with one of my mentees who's really doing incredible work in their own healing practice, working with their own clients. And one of the things that becomes very clear as we're on an ascending path of personal growth is that old patterns and beliefs, limiting relational and power structures that no longer serve us, actually won't support us once we reach certain levels or places in our personal growth. We just can't go further with the old way of being. It's like trying to drive a horse and carriage on Interstate 80. It just ain't going to get you there. So we were doing some power exchange work with their father. And in spiritual psychology work, personal power or life energy is taken literally. That personal power can be exchanged, it can be stolen, can be drained or given away, knowingly or unknowingly. It's often what keeps us tied to dysfunctional relationships is an unconscious power exchange. And ultimately, we are all responsible for our own life energy. And there's lots of very complicated patterns and agreements that people have about trying to manage or help or harm each other with these power structures. And the good news is if power can be taken, it can also be reclaimed. And I did a podcast on reclaiming lost power, number 79. I also did one on karma and family of origin, number 48, if you're interested in learning more about power retrieval or karma. So we did this really beautiful and transformative power exchange with their dead father, who's actually quite an elevated soul, which is not always the case because just because you're dead doesn't mean you're enlightened. But through that power exchange, my mentee realized that they were both driven and disempowered by their beliefs around obligation and subservience. That a lot of their behavior in the world, how they used money, operated in relationships, even at work, and certainly in the family, was driven by a sense of obligation. And obligation is the shadow side of commitment. It's a much lower form. It doesn't allow free will and choice. Obligation is usually externally imposed, and that they often took a subservient role. I identify with that, having been a maid for 12 years. We could call that another lifetime within this lifetime for me. But anyway, subservience is also a really low resonance of service. And so these old structures will not bring them to where they hope and intend to go professionally, personally, socially in their life. And so what needs to be healed reveals itself. And we did an inner journey to look at the genesis or the origin of obligation and subservience. And we came upon an early childhood trauma, but all this past life stuff came up at the same time. And as we stepped into these different lifetimes, it became very clear how these ideas of obligation and subservience were imposed upon them and crystallized within them. And the way I find most helpful to work with past lives is to get some clarity on the moment that arises within that lifetime, and then to fast forward to the moment of their death. Because the moment of our death, in many traditions, could be understood as perhaps the most important moment of our entire life, because it determines what comes next. And whatever's unresolved, whatever the state of our body, mind, spirit complex is at the moment of our death, has implications for what we bring forward. Now, you don't have to believe in reincarnation or the idea of multiple lifetimes to benefit from past life work. It could absolutely be seen as the active imagination of our own psyche generating the archetypes, imagery, felt experience, or unconscious beliefs that our rational, logical mind may not have access to. It's like the advantage of working with tarot or runes or the I Ching to incorporate our intuitive and our intellectual selves to get the most information that we can. So the first lifetime that we came to was in some kind of tribal times, and they were being banished or exiled from the tribe for not doing enough, for breaking some taboos. They felt tremendous shame because they were being shamed unto their death, because in tribal times one could not survive on their own in the wild. And at the moment of their death, they were cold, hungry, and alone. And we went to the spirit at the moment of her death with a lot of her own spiritual posse, which is quite powerful. And we carried that soul forward to the next place for its own highest good and evolution. And the soul was cleansed and cared for and told that they were important, that every life is important. And she was brought to this beautiful healing pyramid with many attendants and helpers, teachers and masters to dissolve the shame and help elevate her experience and process and integrate and understand this experience for the greater good. And the next lifetime we came to was perhaps early biblical times in a village, and someone made unwanted sexual advances on her, which she refused or rebuked, and somehow her admirer was able to destroy her and discredit her publicly, and she was stoned to death. And we went to that soul at the moment of her death, and again with a lot of spiritual assistance, observed as this soul was escorted to a very clear and peaceful place where they were also cleansed, healed, and instructed. And there were other lifetimes with a similar theme. And although the experience in this lifetime has been less dramatic and may not lead them to their death, that fear, that terror actually, of not fulfilling the prescribed obligations, of being harmed or even destroyed for owning their own unique power in the world, is absolutely palpable in their life experience today. And this work can really breed tremendous self-compassion as we're really presented with the depths of human suffering that we all share. And the work is to heal this suffering and elevate ourselves out of these old, destructive and restrictive ways of seeing the world and operating in it. There's tons of literature on past life work, Perhaps the classic is Many Lives, Many Masters by Brian Weiss. It was written in the late 80s, kind of brought awareness of past life regression into the general culture. So again, you don't have to do past life work to understand your deeper dysfunctions or destructive, limiting beliefs in this lifetime. It's usually right in front of us. But if you're particularly stuck or just curious and interested about the larger implications of your own soul across lifetimes, past life regression work can be an interesting and enlightening experience. Thank you so much for listening. If you like this podcast, please consider subscribing, leaving 5 stars or a good review. If there's any topics you'd like to hear more about, send me a DM on Instagram at Renee Lavallee Mckenna. I'm going live this week on Thursday on Instagram with my new friend, Martin Schmeetz. He's a really amazing, authentic life coach living in nature in Belgium in a self-created, intentional community. Martin's 30 years younger than I am, but we share the same outlook and enthusiasm on helping other people live their best life. And we're going to talk about the value of traditional relationships in the modern world. That'll be 8:30 a.m. Pacific, 11:30 Eastern, and 5:30 p.m. UTC if you're in Europe. Our first open-door digital course, Intro to Shamanism Lower World, is available now. And we're making plans to start an interactive private Facebook group to support shamanic journey and other experiential spiritual practices. The group should be starting in early 2022. And if you want to learn more about the incredible power of shamanic journey work, I think we've created a really accessible and easy to follow program that you can do from the comfort of your own home. Shamanic journey work is central to my own practice, and it's really changed my life, and I want to offer it to as many people as possible. So check out the link in the show notes if you'd like to learn more about Intro to Shamanism Lower World. I still have some spots left in my upcoming Inner Child group. It's going to be a 6-week deep dive into emotional healing, personal empowerment. Inner child work is the single most empowering and gentle work I've ever experienced. Really updates our internal operating system, our personal iOS. So if you are ready to make some genuine change in yourself, shoot me an email, info@reneemckenna.com, and I'll tell you more about that upcoming Inner Child group. Thanks as always to my generous supporters on Patreon. Blessings on your path until we meet again. This is Renee Lavallee Mckenna for Spiritual Psychology.